Hi, my name is Bhargavi Davar, and I'm speaking to you from Pune city. Pune is a smaller city on the west of India near Mumbai. Um, I'm really honored to be part of this program on community-based mental health innovations. And I thank Dr. Jaswant, Guzdar, Nicole, and others at the McGill University for inviting me into this program. Really happy to be here with all of you. And the program itself looks amazing. And I hope that you've had some wonderful sessions through the days. My presentation today is in 3 parts. And I hope so that we will have a chance to meet you and have some discussions as well after the session. Well, the first part is a personal narrative. The second part is a little bit of timeline on how we came to do what we are doing today at the Bapu Trust. What are the historical elements that influenced us? We always took a offbeat path in mental health care. That links partly to the life experiences I and some of us at the Bapu Trust had. And it also has to do with our exposure to the broader culture. We had always had very strong engagement with the cultural spaces that we occupy. So that's the second element. And the third element is the actual program itself, and what makes it unique for us, what makes it appropriate for the communities that we work with. How does it link up with the lived experiences of people who actually develop these programs? So that's in 3 segments. This first segment, I would like to start with a little bit of my personal narrative. It's always difficult for me, even at my age, to talk about it. So I'm going to read from what I have, and if possible, then also to show a slide of the kind of images that really I'm ghosted by them even now. Yes, I'm just going to put this slide up for you to. Yep. So many images. I got a few into that slide. Largely images of incarceration. For 5 decades and more after being born, I was still not sure whether what I was witness to as a child of 5 or 6 was true, or whether they were delusions. My brother was younger than me. He was probably 3.5, 4 years old. Limited exposure to those places, but we share a lot of memories in common. They said schizophrenia runs in families. I dared not share what I had seen, lest I too end up there. It was only just 2 years ago, because of a kind journalist who is chronicling the story of the Bapu Trust, that my brother and I actually sat down and shared those memories and found that there was a very high level of congruence. What he remembered and what I remembered were nearly the same. We argued whether she had insulin coma or not. I felt that she did because she had mentioned it to me, and he felt that no, she had not received insulin coma. But really, the bulk of the memories we shared were very much the same. He had some very strong memories as well. So in my family, growing up in the south of India, we never talked about these things. There was a big silence about being mental and going there. My mother was intensely religious. She was in bhakti. She could fluently recite spiritual poems and songs about her personal god Krishna. She spent many hours in devotion and prayer. Members of my large joint family started to call her mental, and soon began a long journey of antipsychotic pills, direct shock treatments, insulin comas, straitjackets, shackling, solitary confinement, mental institutions. She was often, found nearby railway tracks, inside trains, hiding, pulled out, bundled up, and brought home by well-intentioned policemen or some kind neighbors or cousins. We never openly talked about any of this, just that she seemed to disappear from her home as soon as she appeared, and so on and so forth. So life with mom was a series of appearances and disappearances. The system and my family must have considered me too young to be separated from my mother. So I was escorted to visit her in these places quite often. This was the 1960s, just after the Indian independence. They reformed the prisons because of the political experience of being inside of prisons during the freedom movement. They didn't do much about asylums. And so the asylums retained the stale dungeon-like quality of the institutions of colonial India. In many ways, the asylums of today, 70 years later in modern India, look and smell the same. So it was a good 10 years of my life exposure to these places. Private institutions were a bit more fancy, but equally cruel and inhuman. There were a tormenting resurgence of flashback memories through my 20s and the 30s of watching her just after her direct shock treatment, dull and placid, tied down to her bed, spread-eagled, shackled by chains to the iron grill of her small bare room. Policemen carrying her into our home at all hours of the night or morning, bundled up in soft cloth, tied down, curled up like an infant. Her anguished pain, bewilderment, wailing tears as her prayer room was locked, her gods and goddesses given away, her poetry books destroyed, prayer books destroyed. And in my mind also generated several other imaginary scenarios. Where did she live when she ran away from the house? Did she live on the streets as a homeless lunatic? Was she lined up against the walls of the Guruvayur temple where she went very often with the other homeless begging folks? Did she beg for food? Where did she rest? Where did she eat? Who gave her food? These were torments. Tied down and tied down. I heard and saw a lot of that during my childhood years, inside the asylums and outside too. When I first read about the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that is the CRPD, and the right to integrity, that included bodily and mental integrity, that's Article 17 of the CRPD. I even today get emotionally moved by this. I know what that meant to people who inexorably and eventually get tied down, pulled into places for further physical and chemical restraint. Of course, the process of tying down is not so gross anymore, but the outcomes are the same. For me, against a person's will and preference or involuntary commitment is very visceral and very traumatic. After 5 decades, that hasn't changed for me. When a trauma memory is triggered, there are places on my skin, my nose, my eyes, my ears, my body that flare up with the trauma. I want to pull my ears out, scratch my skin, burn it. It's very, very strong even today. In my younger days, I used to faint. I fainted quite often, though the doctors could not say why. As I grew older, and even now, it is an intangible and dirty second skin. Flashes of images, smells of the hospitals, of the confinement that I cannot discard or ignore or forget. It has been an enduring, depressing trauma for more than 5 decades, settled as a cloak on my body. Just about 6 years or so ago, I was visiting the Philippines to meet some peers from the disability movement. They invited me to visit the only asylum in their country, a large panopticon asylum structure in Manila. It was a long drive and it was my first visit to the country. I didn't know the terrain at all. Yet at some point during the drive, I asked my friends if we were getting close because I could smell the place. The cognitive parts of my early experiences, the rationality and irrationality of such institutions, why family members behaved in inhuman ways, the serious depression, suicidal thoughts and attempts, all those got resolved with a variety of actions: studying, research, writing, joining political movements, rigorous fitness schedules, so on and so forth. However, the body remained scarred. The body never forgot. I continue to identify as a survivor of childhood trauma, relating strongly to enduring exposure to mental health care. How strong the history of trauma and the reactions of my body to have spent many decades just thinking about this question: why is the mental health system about custody and not about care? Why is the mental health system about withdrawing justice and depriving people of liberty rather than bringing them more resources, more emotional resources, more social capital, more nutritional benefits, more fitness benefits? So why have we structured our policy systems in this way? Why do we have laws which allow people like me to get so traumatized? People who put my mom in the asylum were not bad people, they were following the law. Why do we have such laws? So I continue with those questions, and today I think there are thousands, if not many tens and hundreds of thousands of people who come to platform like this to ask these questions more frontally and find new solutions. My life will go on with these experiences. I'm not expecting the trauma. I do a lot with my body to reduce the bulk of those experiences, but I still struggle with my body eruptions every now and then.